Good morning, all. Good evening in India. Welcome to the PGurus Fireside Chat Show on February 13th, India time, 9 p.m., United States time, 10:30 a.m. East Coast. Welcome to all. Welcome, Mohandas Pai.
Welcome. Thank you.
Good evening. And we are looking forward to a very exciting discussion today around the developments taking place in India around COVID, around the budget, around the economic forecast, and it's reshaping the growth that after the contraction that occurred in COVID, and putting India back on the rails. No better person than Mr. Pai to walk us through all the different facets that is helping to move the agenda forward. Wherever it's possible, we'll intersperse it with US, but the primary focus is around India. I think India is has demonstrated to the world it's a world leader in the management of COVID. It has not received the due attention. It has had sporadic attention, and much of the focus has been around all the issues of China, the WHO, and the US deaths that has plagued and the various variants. But in the process, the Indian effort has receded into, in my humble view, a little bit of a backstage. So, Mohandas, we will start with the whole COVID and what has been the COVID story in India and why what has led it to be so successful.
Well, let me give some data, Sridhar. I think it's important for people to have data because we have seen so many reports in the BBC, New York Times, and others by Indian malcontents who are sepoys, as people call them, talking about the unmitigated disaster that India is. So let me give the data as what India has achieved. The world has, till yesterday, 107 million people who have been infected by COVID, 107 million. 2.4 million are dead. The United States has 27 million for a population of 325 million. 476,000 people are dead in the richest, most powerful nation on this planet, a country like no other in this world, the paragon of technology and everything else. India has only 10.8 million people who have been infected. That is, India has only maybe 35% of what the United States has for a population which is 4 times the United States. We are 4 times larger than the United States. We are 35% of what the United States has in terms of infection. In terms of death, the United States has 476,000. We were 155,000. 155,000 means we are 1/3 the United States in debt. 4 times the population. So 1/3. So what does it mean, Sridhar? It basically means that India has done extremely well, and we have vaccinated maybe 7 million people, and we are giving free vaccines to maybe 60 countries on the world. We're the largest production of vaccines for AstraZeneca in the world. We can produce 1.5 billion doses of vaccine to help the world. So India has done well. And why did India do well? Well, we had a very rigorous 45-day shutdown starting from the last week of March. Prime Minister Modi spoke to people. People shut down. Yes, there was a little bit of suffering. Migrants went away, they walked, etc. But remember, the Indian people are used to pain. Indian people are used to a lot of pain. You people in the United States are, so very cozy. You can't take any pain. The water doesn't come in a tap. You don't know what to do, right? So you are very rich people. So we live like ordinary human beings, Aam Aadmi in this planet. So we can take pain, and people took pain, and people came back, and the economy is coming back. I'll talk about the economy later. But as far as COVID has done, I think people have done well. And also, Sridhar, because we are a very dirty country, which all of you say unhygienic, we have more natural immunity than you. We have much more natural immunity. So I think if you look at the zero or the COVID cases, they say about 25-30% of people have been infected have got natural immunity. So I think we have a lot of natural immunity. Maybe the fact that everybody has got a BCG vaccine when they were young, so many things that are there. So, people are abused us for being dirty, unhygienic. But the fact remains, we are surviving. We got a lesser death rate than the whole world. We got a much, much lesser death rate than the United States or the United Kingdom or most countries in the world, excluding Southeast Asia.
I think that's a great, and phenomenal summary in terms of layering the data relative to the world versus United States versus India. I think this is one of the questions that we have been battling in United States as to what is the reason for United States to have, and we don't have an answer as yet for this big number that we see relative to the rest of the world. I think you have alluded to some of the factors which has differentiated India probably from the rest. See, one of the questions that often pop up is: has the herd immunity in India relative to, let us say, rest of the world? Because Indians generally kind of cluster together, notwithstanding the lockdown, the very successful 45-day lockdown. One of the attributes is probably India has done better with herd immunity relative to rest of the world.
Well, maybe herd immunity, maybe innate immunity, maybe more discipline. More people are wearing masks in South India. North India, they're not used to wearing masks or other things, but they're getting by quite fine. Bihar, the poorest state of India, has one of the lowest infections. And I was speaking to a friend of mine who goes to Dharavi, the big slum in Mumbai, and there people are fine. I think all of them have got herd immunity. There was fear that a lot of people are going to die. Not many died. Only 1,000 people died in a population, maybe 2 or 3 million. And many people, the people themselves said, we live here, things are not so good, but we got immunity. Whatever it is, Sridhar, the data says very clearly India has done extremely well compared to the United States, compared to Europe, compared to all the rich countries. Exclude Asia. Japan has not had much infection. We don't know the reality of China, but China seems to have done well. Southeast Asia, Korea has done well. But if you look at the rich countries of the OECD, Europe has not done well. United States, has done what the United States does. It's big in everything, including infection, including death, including spending money, etc. It's the richest, most powerful country in the world, right? So I think, you must give credit to India.
Right. Okay. So I think before we wrap this segment of this particular topic, India is today the net exporter, or evolving to be the net exporter of the medicine or the vaccines to the world. Is it finally calibrated and balanced both to meet the vast Indian needs as well as the global needs? Is the production supply chains are scalable enough to sustain that in the foreseeable future?
Yes, I think our Prime Minister said by July, August, we'll vaccinate 300 million Indians. We have just vaccinated the first round of all the health workers and front care workers. Second round is started from today, I think. And he has said that 300 million by July, August. And we will do 300 million. Capacity in India is 1.5 billion per year. And we have our company sending out shipments every single day to all the countries and helping them out. Just the other day, Premier Trudeau of Canada called up Prime Minister Modi asking for his help, and Prime Minister Modi assured him that India will stand by Canada despite Trudeau egging on our agitators and making some very silly remarks about India, etc. India has treated the world well, and India's policy is that we treat the whole world as a family, right? So India stood by everybody, and India will stand by everybody. India will share. We have enough for us and enough for everybody else.
Great.
Enough for most others.
Yeah, to support,
excluding the rich countries.
I think we are ordering also some medicines from, notwithstanding the fact, eventually we'll be one of the largest producer. I think the prediction is that projection is will be about 5.6 billion, and India is the second with about 3.6 or 3.7 billion vaccines coming out annually. I think.
Remember, Sridhar, you must remember, Sridhar, the richest country in the world was not the most generous country. It cornered all the vaccines, paid money to Pfizer, everybody else, to make sure that you guys are protected. You didn't care a damn about the rest of the world. You said, let them go die. It doesn't matter. We will protect our population. You paid enormous amount of money. You used the laws to make sure that everybody was inside. And you took advantage. And the world has seen that very well. In fact, I was in the meeting of the South Center, which is a think tank for South countries in Geneva. And I'm on the board. And they were talking about the inequity of global distribution of the vaccine by the rich countries. So I think all the countries in the world have seen this, and they're very unhappy about what is happening. The United States, instead of leading the world in making sure that every human being on the planet has an equal chance of survival, they said, locked themselves up as usual and said, we are going to do everything, put everybody and corner all the supplies, and we won't do it ourselves.
I have a very different view to your view, but that's okay because we don't want to. United States actually took the lead in basically, this is going back to February, March, when data was very scant. President Trump at that point of time took the lead, pre-funded the research,
Yes.
for the world to benefit. When a vaccine is produced by AstraZeneca or Johnson and Johnson or Pfizer or BioNTech, which came a bit later, or to the Israeli, we funded close to $10 billion for vaccines to come out around the world, not to corner the supplies, but the vaccines to be out. So India benefited because India has joint venture with Pfizer, J&J. The most recent one is BioNTech. But India also did its own. So I just don't know. I mean, Europeans may have a different view. They kind of went to sleep, possibly. But Europeans did play a part in their own way because the biotech pharma industry is very heavily located in, as you probably know, between Germany and Switzerland. And of course, even in Britain. So I don't think US cornered, but US led the world efforts, pre-funded, and by the way, they delivered. President Trump delivered the vaccine in November, having promised it in February. Okay, nobody expected him to deliver. Everybody thought this is just another rhetoric. And again, US became the first nation with UK to roll these vaccines out with simultaneous research funded, pre-funded. This is unusual. It was not a research grant. It is a pre-funding of the buying of the vaccines. Just the Pfizer alone, we paid $1.95 billion. So I don't agree with the argument that.
Okay. But you can also tell your listeners, viewers, how much of the vaccine has been sent by the United States to other countries from the United States.
Well, I think that the 340, there is still, we have vaccine shortage here. We just ordered 200 million vaccines to vaccinate people.
Okay, Sridhar.
Yeah. No, I'm not debating. Look, we have deaths, 492,000 people.
I know. You're in bad shape. You deserve to get all the vaccine in the world to save your lives. You're in real bad shape. You got to be careful, Sridhar. You got to be careful. Don't go out in the streets in New York.
No, very, very bad shape because it is mismanagement. I mean, India, I think in my view, there are three messages, from India, which is, you guys have, India has done a great job in managing it, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, besides the inherent immunity, this is what I've heard. You can, you're also, big in the hospital industry. They're willing to use protocols, which is not the norm.
Discipline.
Yeah. Right. So, which is not the norm. Anyway, Mohan, thank you for that segment. We'll now leave we wish India all success. We wish vaccine diplomacy to be one of the pillars and aspects of India's epitome in terms of the world heritage and world contribution. So very proud, very happy as a person of Indian origin. Second is, I think we'll go into the budget part of it, and then we'll get back into the economy. So what do you think? There has been, in my humble view, I've looked at the budget, but I would like to hear your views on both the macro and the micro picture in terms of the budget proposals that have been put on the table.
Okay, let me start with giving data. In the beginning of COVID, people said India's GDP will collapse. It didn't collapse. They gave a figure of 9.5% decline in GDP. And then it was revised to 7.7% minus in real GDP, not nominal. Nominal is after inflation. And just now, Citibank has given a report to say it will only be minus 6.2. That means the economy is doing much, much better than anybody anticipated, even last month, even by the government when they're doing the budget. The nominal GDP was estimated last time by our CSO, Central Statistical Organization, at minus 4.5. And now, since Citi is at 6.2, it will come down to minus 3. And the reason is, second quarter of our year, that is July, August, September, was a great quarter. The corporate sector had record profits. We've never seen this kind of profits ever in history. Now, this quarter, October-November results, for which the results are coming out. It could be over by this week. Again, record, one more record. The banks are doing extremely well. They are not having the NPAs or bad loans they all anticipated by the Reserve Bank even maybe 3 months ago. Even if you take some of the loans not accounted, they're pretty good, and they're able to cover them up. Yes, they have to start lending, and interest rates have come down. Liquidity has gone up. RBI has managed the economy very well. So economy is coming back. We're having record sales of auto month on month. And of course, last year was a bad year because we moved on to what is called Bharat 6, changed the fuel to Euro 6. That's called Bharat 6. So there was a dislocation last year, but nevertheless, we are doing extremely well. Jobs are coming back. Jobs are coming back because today I went to a construction site for the new Manipal University. They're not able to get labor. And real estate is booming in Mumbai because the rates have been reduced. The sales are up maybe 3x compared to a normal month, and is continuing even in this quarter. Even Bangalore, we're seeing real estate go up. Delhi has gone up. All of the country, real estate, residential sales has gone up. Auto sales, auto makes up 47% of our industrial manufacturing, and that's up. Services, retail, others are still down. They're coming back. I think jobs are getting more and more right now, and the end of the year will be pleasant surprise to see jobs go up. So next year, the government said that we could grow by 11.5% because the base impact. Remember, this year, first quarter was bad. I'm sure you have it in the US too. Just now, Citibank said it will not be 11.5, it will be 12.5. But 12.5 plus about 4% inflation is 16.5% in nominal terms. And if the rupee dollar remains at 72.5 or 73, and it will, because we got $590 billion of reserves right now, and it could only go up by the end of this March, and the rupee remains stable, the GDP in rupees and dollars could go up by 16.5%. And 16.5% on something like $2.8 billion or $2.9 trillion is a very, very large amount. And we certainly will cross maybe $3.3 trillion or so, which will be very, very exciting for us. And of course, all the Cassandras and the people who write in Nikkei and all other magazines and New York Times and Washington Post and BBC who have been putting venom on us will have to, eat crow. Now, as far as the budget is concerned, the budget was a pleasant surprise for a very good reason. The finance minister cleaned up our budget documents by saying off-budgetary borrowings will be put into the budget. Sridhar, we got something called the National Savings Certificate, post office saving. People save, the interest rates are higher than bank deposits. They got record inflow this year, record inflow of maybe about 60, maybe about, 60, $70 billion. And, they said, and that money was used to give loans to the Food Corporation in India instead of taking money from the budget, outside the budget. They put that in the budget. So fiscal deficit for this year, as per the budget, will be 9.5%. Everybody was anticipating 7.58%, but she's cleaned up and taken that into account. So, and that is very, very high. The second important thing that we see very clearly, she has underestimated the tax receipts for this year, March 21. Because if you look at the tax receipts in the budget, the tax receipts are less than last year. And till December, the actual tax receipts were just, I think, maybe overall 8% or 6% less than the same period last year. And last year, the January, February, March period was very bad. But this year, there's going to be a boom because we're going to pay corporate tax on the March 15th, and that is expected to be an all-time high. So I think the revenues will go up, and the figures end of the year for the government budget may turn out to be better. For the next year, she has retained the expenditure at the same pace as this year. It's been 34.67 lakh crores, 34.11 lakh crores, but the fiscal deficit is coming down to 6.8% from 9.5%. She has not cut the borrowing because you are a proponent of the new monetary theory or whatever it is. I'm sure you'll explain it to readers. You are an expert on that. So she has not cut it. She is spending 26% more on infrastructure next year. And she's funding, health spending has gone up hugely, including for COVID, including 60,000 crores, $10 billion nearly for water. But the government of India under Prime Minister Modi has said by 2022, 2023, every house will have water in this country. And you can imagine, Sridhar, being an Indian, what it means to have tap water in every household. Look at the impact on health. Look at the impact on reducing infant mortality, female mortality, etc. That's going to be a tremendous game changer. So we're going to have a large amount for COVID, for enough for 300 million doses, 300 million people. We're going to have increased spending on hospitals. About 620 districts will have a central hospital. Each district will have a hospital. The government is going to build that. So huge spending on health, huge spending on infrastructure. And next year too, the tax revenues have not been estimated at a high pace. They've been estimated at low pace right now, based on the assumption that this year will be low. And we could have a pleasant surprise where the tax revenues could go up. And most people say the fiscal deficit next year will be less than what the government has budgeted. So more spending this year, more spending next year. Our borrowing rates come down. GDP growth will be at an all-time high, never seen in history. Of course, the base impact, and more spending on capex, etc. The last point I want to make, Sridhar, all people, including some leftist economists who worked as the chief economic advisor in Delhi, whom you know, they always abuse India and lie through the teeth. They've been saying that investment ratio has come down. Why is it come down? Oh, because trust deficit is there in India. There's no trust deficit. The investment to GDP ratio was 34% at the highest, maybe 8 years back. It came down to 28%. Now it's gone back this year to 31%. And next year could be 31.5%. What came down was not corporate investment, not public investment, household investment. Household investment came down by about 4.5% in 2 years. And household investment was primarily in real estate. So the real estate booms from 8 years back, investment GDP went up, that came down. And now I think real estate is coming back after many years because people are buying houses. Interest rates are all-time low. EMI is at all-time low, like the United States. Of course, you pay very less interest because the world is giving you all those goodies. You're printing more currency notes. So I think, the investment to GDP ratio could go up. 31% of, let's say, $3 trillion GDP is $900 billion, Sridhar. That's going to be the capex in the country. And it's going to be funded by internal savings of people, the household and business and government, and only 2% of GDP is coming from outside. We're investing 31%, only 2% coming from outside to FDI, only 2%. So India's economy, by all indication, is in very good shape and is getting better. And we're having structural adjustments. Prime Minister Modi, for the first time, stood up in Parliament a few days ago and said, this country requires the private sector to work with government. We have to empower the private sector. We have to respect them. First time. Nobody has said this because they still have this Nehruvian disdain for profits, even though they enjoy the fruits of the hard work of all of us who pay taxes and work hard and slog our butts out to pay those taxes, high taxes, and the corporate sector will create jobs. They abuse the corporate sector, especially some people who stay in government-paid, taxpayer-paid bungalows in New Delhi, not paying any money, right? They get free things. And so I think Prime Minister said that. So deep reforms in labor, deep reforms in defense, deep reforms in incentivizing manufacturing, deep reforms in the financial sector, deep reforms in FDI, enormous amount of reforms in the last 8 months. So I think, your dream and our dream of a $5 trillion economy by 2025 will soon be a reality.
Great, great. That's a great, excellent kind of, analysis of the budget, laying down the macro principles and the restructuring of the economy, both on the capital investments as well as the government's willingness. I mean, you and I have been flouting this, day in and day out. If you can't borrow now, you're never going to borrow. If you're not going to borrow, you are never going to borrow. And I think, to me, people look at this in a different way. So the way we look at it in the United States is, look, taxes are collected from the people. There is an obligation on the part of the government to demonstrate what they are doing with those taxes to give back to the people who continue to fund those taxes. Now, if I am a banker running, the treasury and the balance sheet of the government, and I am saying I have a fixed tax, I have a fixed income. I've got an income which says, I was $3.4 trillion, of which 75% of the income comes from people, direct payroll taxes as well as direct taxes from individuals. Only 7% comes from the corporate. So I owe it to the people and the small business. Vast part of those payroll taxes comes from the small business, which is the engine of the economy. So what we are saying here is you borrow. When you borrow, to make sure that your interest costs are affordable within the income. So when we have our borrowings have gone up here, and this is what we have been pushing, but our interest costs by restructuring the debt, interest costs are actually less than the last year and the year before when the debt was lower and when the debt is higher. So we're paying $380 billion in interest. We are paying only 308 or $310 billion in 2020, even less, $284 billion in 2021. So as we look out for the next 5, 6 years, okay, so the money, income that we are receiving from the people via the taxes, we are giving back at the time when they need most. That is why these direct payments have kept the economy. So, Mike, when you and I say that, hey, this is the time to borrow, and most of this, what you call as the Keynesian economists, don't understand that that the capital formation is not purely government, but capital formation is also intelligent usage of the balance sheet in terms of external capital available when the interest rates are especially at this level of zero. It's not going to raise before 2022. That was again made clear by Jerome Powell in the most recent statement. If we have prime rate 0% in the United States, you're not going to have 7% interest rates in the rest of the world. Either it is less or maybe 25 basis points. So the world benefits with the fiscal policy of with the monetary policy of the Fed here, right? So I think that kudos to Nirmala ji and Subramanian ji and so on. Yes, yes.
Sridhar, you made a very excellent point, and kudos to the Fed, etc. Except that your currency is the de facto currency for the whole world. So even if you print 10 times more, the world will have to accept because the world savings are coming to you. So the supply of money coming to the United States. That's great. I mean, wish you all the best. I wish we can also go and borrow at 2% in the United States for 30-year money and blow it up, because after 30 years, we don't know who's going to pay it back. I think it's good. Anyway, the difference, you made a wonderful point, which I want to say. What is India's challenge? Our external debt today is $564 billion. Our reserves are $590 billion. So today, for the first time, Sridhar, we have more reserves than the entire external debt, including government debt and private sector debt in overseas currency. First time in our history, Sridhar. Nobody, we should stand and applaud. First time in history, we had more foreign. You've been talking about it, Sridhar. I know in your talk, and you've been saying India should take it up to $750 billion, $1 trillion, and then you can stand up before the world. Nobody can shake you. And it's actually happening, Sridhar. 590 billion, 564 billion is foreign exchange. All the debt, private, public, everything.
My prediction was 575 billion reserves before 2020. And my prediction is $750 billion reserve before it hits 5 trillion, which roughly translates to 15% of GDP. India will be in an unshakable position with that type of reserves and economy. So I think that
I hope those people in the Carnegie Foundation, the chief economic advisors who belong to India, who were in the US, and the former governor of the Reserve Bank, who's in one of your universities, listen to you and understand and appreciate that India is really going to make it.
Well, I think that there is. I don't know whether it is intellectual or political capital that is coloring their minds. It cannot be. My humble view is, it cannot be the intellectual capital, because the reason is
they should have some. They should have some intellectual capital. When it comes to India, I think, they put it aside, and it's shocking where, many of them lie through the teeth. I want to make it very clear. They lie through the teeth because I know one or two of them will lie through the teeth and, give us fake numbers. But Sridhar, the next point, which I think you made a very important point, which I think the government needs to understand, our interest charges every year is 20% of our gross revenue. Wow. 20%. That is a problem.
That is a problem.
Because the borrowing cost, the government of India was 7.2% till last year. This year, till March 21, our borrowing cost for 10-year debt is 5.8. It's come down because the Reserve Bank of India has flooded the market with liquidity. We have more than $120 billion of liquidity. And, that liquidity is reduced, the short-term money market rates. And the Reserve Bank of India has learned how to manage it because the bond traders took the rate up after the budget saying government is borrowing more money. They flooded the market with liquidity and brought it down. Just like the Fed has been trying to do, buy long-term bonds and flood the market and bring the interest rates down, bring the yield curve down. The Reserve Bank of India has learned the trick. And the Reserve Bank of India, thanks to Governor Shaktikanta Dasa, who is new and who is from the government and not an economist, professional economist, who come from the United States and tell us poor souls what to do, he has said very clearly he is going to have an accommodative policy till the economy turns around. So he's not going to tighten up money. He's going to not increase interest rates, etc. We need low interest rate to accelerate investment. And I'm happy to tell you, most of the corporates who gave out good results said they're going to increase the capex spending and expand capacity in the near term. And Prime Minister Modi reduced the tax rate from 35% to 25%. 22 plus surcharge, 24.5, 25%. Internal accruals have gone up. And they're reinvesting that money back into capex, creating jobs. So we are on the verge of a capex cycle coming back, which I'm sure as a financier and a banker, is the key to jobs. So I think our challenge is 20% of what the government of India earns or, receives money is spent on interest, which is very high, which has to come down. And that means we have to have lower interest rates for government borrowing.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So just to get contrast, average 1.2% of our GDP now is the interest cost, which is historically been at historical average has been 3.2%. So you can understand on a 20 or a 25.
We are at 3.5%. We are around 3.5, I think 3.5 to 4%, if I'm right.
That's high.
That's high, very high.
That's very high, especially to come out of situations like pandemic. In terms of our expense, interest cost to expenses is less than 5%. Okay,
we are 20%. Now, if we are at the United States or even at 10%, we'll have 10% more of receipts to spend. So we are paying for very bad policy and high interest rates of the past. All because when it comes to government borrowing, you cannot have high interest rates for government borrowing. You got to have lower interest rate by managing liquidity in the economy. Am I right, Sridhar? The short-term liquidity goes into the long-term yield curve. You spoil the short-term liquidity. We had overnight money going up to 80%, 90% about 10 years ago. We had a bad management. I think now the Reserve Bank has understood because they must have learned from the Federal Reserve. I hope they see what is happening and they know that this has to be done.
Indeed. That is the asymmetric, the rate curve, which can hurt the economy quite badly. Mohan, I think coming to the capital formation, why is it? Because I can look at the numbers. India, when Mr. Modi assumed power in 2014, close to $23 billion was the rate of annual flow of capital, all forms, private, etc. Today, it is averaging between $65 to $70 billion. We have discussed. Why is it that facet? That's a lot of money relative to the GDP of the country coming in as a capital to rebuild the industry, right? Rebuild the industry. They're not coming in, to buy land or to do other things. Why is it that, Princeton Institute and Carnegie, not Carnegie is more left, but, the Chicago economists or the economists are not highlighting this point, which is the external investments. India is right now in the top 3 destinations in terms of receiving capital for the new industries formation in India.
Sridhar, it doesn't fit the narrative of depicting India in poor light. So they will not focus on the money that is coming in. Tell me, why will global investors pour money into India? They hope to earn a greater return than in the home country after adjusting for exchange risk. And where do they hope to earn the return? By higher growth in GDP and reflecting in returns in the stock market, because the stock market follows the GDP growth or goes ahead of the GDP growth. Correct. And investment approach is available here to buy assets which give you a very good return, right? So the investment, the trust of the investor, global investor who vote with the money is much higher than the trust the leftist economists have who live in the United States and abuse India day in and day out. and their competitors in our country. I want to say it on record because I think, this has gone beyond normal bounds, what we call the empty craniums, because they deliberately try to abuse India. Now, Sridhar, the problem has been in the last 3-4 years, because of the NPA problem, the bad debts problem, banks were not lending. The public sector banks, which make up 65% of lending, were not lending. The private sector banks are doing only personal lending, and they are now grown. And the corporates are not able to invest more, and government was not investing more. Government was trying to invest more, but it was stuck with something called the fiscal deficit. Now the problem is being, why was the private sector not investing? We had more power plants than we needed power. We had more capacity in our ports than earlier. And the road sector, the private sector was stuck because government did not pay the money for carrying out the road sector. So the government bad policies of not paying money, getting into disputes, made sure that all the construction companies were in bad shape, and they were not spending. And then in the private sector, the real estate companies were in real trouble. They were not able to complete projects. They had taken money. They were cheating people, blah, blah, blah. And interest rates for housing loans were high. And even though this money came in, this money was accumulated by the Reserve Bank of India in the form of reserves, where they took this money that came in and bought Federal Reserve bonds at 1%, 1.5%. You understand? So the money was not being absorbed in the economy, is accumulating as reserves. And to add to that, when the oil prices came down, I think this year, we ran a surplus on the current account, surplus on the trade account. Why is that? Because oil is the biggest contributor to trade deficit and the current account deficit. Because we have a balance of payment surplus which comes with capital receipts, but the current account, which is trade and invisibles, we had a deficit. Now we're going to have a surplus, and the current account surplus could be maybe 2% of GDP this year, and that also is accumulating in reserves. So now, going forward, the way out is the corporate sector is going to accelerate its investment. The government is increasing investment to GDP. People are buying real estate all over the place and increasing it. So we're going to see all this investment accelerate. And that's why the 31% of GDP investment may go up to 33, 34% in the next 2 or 3 years. So we are going to absorb capital. Now, Sridhar, if you add to that the world is surplus in liquidity, the Federal Reserve till 22 will keep it down. There won't be a tantrum or whatever it is that people talk about in the United States. And Japan is never going to have positive interest rates the way they're going, because they're just pumping up more money. And the Bank of Japan has become the largest holder of equities in Japan, much more than the Japan pension fund, right? You know that story. So, Indian companies are going out to borrow money. The private sector has borrowed money. The State Bank borrowed money at the lowest interest rate ever for 10 years. The Power Finance Corporation borrowed money. The Indian Railway Finance Corporation borrowed money. Now, steel company like JSW has said they're going to borrow $1 billion. It's very meek. For the full year, they may borrow $15-20 billion. I think they must go borrow $100 billion a year for the next 5 years, 20-30-year money, when the money is available, and invest back into India and create India as an export base for outside. See, one of India's problems has been, Sridhar, that no country in human history has grown at a particular point of time without exporting out. Even the United States became a large exporter, Japan, Germany, Southeast Asia, China, etc. Now, India too has to become an exporter, large exporter, so you can export out using its surplus labor. But bad policies to incentivize capital in this country as against labor made sure that didn't happen. High logistic costs, supply chain costs of 14% of GDP. Now with the roads getting built, the railways doing very well, and railways are now going at 45 kilometers an hour as against 25 kilometers an hour for 30 years. All right, it's a joke. And supply chain coming down, GST and one single market, electronic payments, etc. Our supply chain costs may come down from 14% to 8% in the next 2 years. They must be today at 12% or maybe 11%. They will come down, and that will make Indian industry more efficient. So we are on the cusp of great change. Everybody is optimistic, except the people who run fake narratives.
I hear you. Again, that's an excellent kind of analysis. One of the systemic changes that has taken place in the United States, which people still are not able to come to grips with is the top uh, 10 or 12 companies in the S&P uh, roughly contribute 40 to 40% or 45% of PE of the S&P. Okay, Apple, Amazon, Tesla, etc., Microsoft. Now, the secret behind this transformative effect, notwithstanding the fact that there has been every change and shift to the digital infrastructure, if you look at the balance sheets of many of these institutions, there's no borrowing. So therefore, there's no vagaries to the cyclicality of the rates and the economic cycles. Many of them have balance sheets which have reserves greater than the balance sheet reserves of many countries. Apple has a reserve which is greater than the reserve of United States government. Okay, greater.
Not the printing press.
No,
they don't have the printing press yet.
No, their printing press is Apple phone. Okay, look at the sales.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazon reported a top line sales of $125 billion. $125 billion in the last quarter. So I have been saying that only country which can reach that specific model, if it pursues, is companies building in-house reserves so it has flexibility for diversification without relying on the bank or bank borrowing or
debt
of lending.
Sridhar, I think there's an excellent analysis. I think you should have a talk with Saurabh Mukherjee, who runs Marcellus Investors.
Yeah.
Marcellus is one of the best PMS. I'll introduce you to him. You must call and have a chat with him, with the viewers. And he was in a budget discussion with me, and he said, in India, the top 20 companies are creating 70% of corporate profits. Just like in the United States, you take the top 20 companies, they have a very high share of corporate profits. In India today, the top 20 companies, they were some 36%, I think 10 years ago or something. They're now 70%. That means the top 20 companies are becoming bigger. They got huge cash reserves in the balance sheet. They got great power to invest, and they're going to invest hugely. And they're going to drive the economy. They're no longer pygmies. We have two companies in this country who got a market cap of $160, $170 billion. We got another, for you it is very small, Sridhar. You got hundreds of companies, but remember, we are a small economy. We're not as rich as you are. And we got a bank. We got a bank which is more than $120 billion, which is more valuable than Citibank, Deutsche Bank, and many other banks. Okay, $120 billion, HDFC Bank. Then we also got Infosys, which is about $68 billion, could go up to 100, hopefully. Let's see what happens. So I think the Indian companies accumulating huge cash reserves, they got the investment power, they got the market value, and this concentration of resources will accelerate growth. I agree with you.
No, that's great. So coming to the last segment, one of the questions has been the demand stimulation. Just to give you, which people don't present it, the stimulus programs where we put in 3.14 trillion thus far, 938 billion went into small business. It's a number that people have to recognize. 3.14 trillion, 938 billion went into small business. With a caveat, those who have taken the benefit of this 938 billion will not cut their employment more than 10% till either 2025 or 2030 in some instances. Employment preserved, capital given, and most important, for them to keep the lights on and continue the business. So my question, therefore, that indirectly, in conjunction with the direct stimulation of close to $1 trillion, or including the rebates, about $1 trillion, only $300 billion, only another $500 to $600 billion went into things such as local administration, COVID programs, etc., etc. This I'm talking about the 3.1. So that's where the demand stimulus came in. The demand was calculated. The direct payments was calculated equal to the per capita. So everybody kind of got, and people were kind of spending money. So how does the demand stimulation part of it is happening in India, Mohan? To just kind of wrap up.
Well, Let me explain that the government of India had a different strategy. You know, you see, India and the US are not comparable. You are very rich. Your currency is a global currency. You can borrow infinite amount of money. The world will give you and buy the green paper that you print. You can print infinite amount of money. We can't do that. We have some limitations. What the government did was the government gave direct benefits to all the people for food, gas, and everything, which was about maybe 1.5% or 2% of GDP. 2% of GDP, so that people had enough on the table. A lot of people lost jobs. Some of them got some direct money to keep body and soul together. Most people didn't do it. For the MSMEs, which are the largest employer, the government guaranteed $40 billion of debt, out of which $30 billion of debt have been sent back to them. That $40 billion is equal to $280 billion in US term, because US GDP is 7 times India's GDP. All right. $280 billion is not as big as what you did. And then the government also made sure that they give more debt to farmers and everybody else. And that was the equal $40 billion. So $560 billion for debt was guaranteed by the government or given on very easy terms. That helped keep people afloat. Then what the government did, the government accelerated infrastructure spending for this year and for the next year. Because when you spend on infrastructure, it directly creates jobs. So we're seeing the impact right now in terms of high job creation in construction, high job creation in the downstream industries, and people saying we're going to hire more. So I think that is very good, because, investment and then the government reduced the interest rates. The Reserve Bank of India and the government reduced the interest rates. The EMI has come down from, interest rates have come down for housing loan from 8.5% to 6.7%. The 2% is tremendous. And the government reduced the registration rate in Mumbai and some other cities, and that has led to a huge sale increase. And the real estate companies are coming back and investing back, because real estate and housing purchases are a very large part of the consumer demand. Because if a lot of people go buy houses, construction starts off, then jobs are given, cement sales happen, steel sales happen, and then the cycle comes. And today, we're also seeing that more and more purchases of, two-wheelers and four-wheelers. Why? Because interest rates have come down, easy terms are available, and people are buying more and more vehicles. And this COVID has made sure the middle class want personal vehicles. The traffic jams are increasing in Bangalore. That's the bad part in Mumbai and every other place. So we're having a problem. And that is leading to auto sales going up. And auto sales make up 47% of our industrial output, right? And lastly, there is a feeling of optimism coming in, because the stock markets are up. The stock markets are up. There's a feeling of optimism, and that means people are willing to spend more money. Because remember, it's only when people feel like spending more money, consumer spending goes up, and because there's enough savings in this country, and that leads to everything else. And we must remember, Sridhar, out of 1.38 billion people, 1 billion people live on less than $1,000 a day. I mean, $1,000 a year. Sorry, $1,000 a year. That's not going to move the needle.
No.
If the balance 380 million people who live on maybe $4,000 a year, they, on an average, if they spend 10%, 15% more, that's going to move the needle. And that is where the consumption is coming up. So we are seeing real estate goes up. We are seeing car sales go up. We are seeing infrastructure go up. We're seeing private capex go up. And that is leading to a lot more jobs. Unlike you people who give money for consumption, in India, we are spending more on infrastructure too.
Right. No, great. Mohan, this has been a wonderful session. Thank you so much. As always, we have very stimulating kind of discussions. I also want to close out with one message to Modi ji and Nirmala ji. We have all possibility we will increase the corporate tax to 28%. Companies which are having business overseas, which typically avoid taxes by virtue of being, Janet Yellen is generous enough to put 10% tax on overseas income. Okay? So my message is, it is very emotive. If you cut your taxes from 27%, you said, corporate taxes. So you
35% to 25% with surcharges. 35% you've been cut to 25%.
Well, you want to have, $200 to $500 billion of capital coming in, cut the corporate tax for 5 years to 25%. And if there is a 10% overseas, maybe like a PLI program, you give a 5% credit on the 10%, then you're going to have a capital flow because entrepreneurs.
But Sridhar, the good news is for new manufacturing companies coming in some different areas, the tax rate is come down to 15% each year for the next 10 years.
Great. So therefore, these industries must be targeted because nobody wants to pay, 28% plus 10% if you happen to be overseas, that kind of tax because it's just not economic for job creation. People don't understand. We were at 3.5% unemployment because we cut the taxes to 21%. When you take a look at the top line revenue numbers, our growth has been about 4% in US, but it has not sunk the economy because that is only contributing to 7. This is where the left narrative mafia and the central economists whom we are generously exporting to you and you are generously exporting to us, all these left media writers to New York Post, Washington Post, New York Times, and so on. So we have been having this exchange, but who don't get into this narrative, which is namely to say, reducing the corporate taxes has a minuscule impact on the overall, because they don't look at the balance sheet, and they are only trained in the liberal narrative rather than a quantitative, either financial or economic narrative in a fiscal context. I think that's what we are kind of struggling. So there's an opportunity for India to tap into attracting some more investments from US businesses, which are going to be taxed very soon.
I think it's happening, Sridhar, because I think there's a new feeling of optimism. The global supply chain is coming to India. I think there's a report saying that I think 10% of the companies that are left China have come to India. It's a very small number. Great majority gone to Vietnam. And what people don't understand about Vietnam is Vietnam has a 1,200 kilometers border with China. The same Chinese companies in China have gone to Vietnam and set up immediately across the border. And they're using Vietnam as a base to export, which they were doing from China. And that's why, it has become there. It's not that Vietnam is going to offer a market. We have raised tariffs on some imports from China because China dumps. You'll know that our trade deficit China is $400 billion for the last 10 years. And last year was $50 billion. And China is not going to open their market to anybody. You know that how they're a mercantilist economy. Sure. You know what they've done to the United States. They hollowed out the United States largely. So I think we have taken care of that by making sure that China is not able to dump. And that has and that plus the PLI, which is incentivizing manufacturing 13 industries, will make sure that India becomes a larger producer of many, many goods. We have started exporting in mobile with a value added of 20%. It'll go to 30% in the next 2 years. Samsung and Nokia are setting up huge plants here. They already set up. And the good news is, Sridhar, we are finally getting contract manufacturing to happen in India in a big way. If you look at China, a lot of the manufacturing is done by contract manufacturers who manufacture for the bigger global brands like a Samsung or an Apple or whatever it is. They create the job, they understand. Yeah. But the end result is they train the people, they get the technology, then they can create their own brands. Right. Indians industry didn't understand that. They always want to say, I'll sell my brand without technology, without productivity, without capital. Now, large contract manufacturers have come. They are expanding like crazy. In 5 years' time, they will be the ground where anybody can come instead of putting money, buying land and doing this. Sign up with them. Immediately in 3 months, your production comes out. Put your chapa and sell it in India and sell outside with very low capital investment. That is the way India has got to work. Indians have understood. That's good news.
Great news. Excellent, Mohan. Thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure.
Gentlemen, I have one question for each of you. I'll start with Mohandas Pai. Sridhar ji, if you will just bear with me, I'll come to you in just 1 second. Mohandas ji, the question is from Yogesh Dubey. What are your views regarding government's plan to create the bad bank to solve the NPAs? How will it work, and will it be able to recover the NPAs?
Well, I frankly think a bad bank is a bad idea, because why are the banks not able to sell off their assets? They're not able to sell off there because of bad legal processes and the long time taken in the courts. Now, if you're going to take it off the balance sheet, put it into one single place, and you're going to issue securities to the banks in return, where the banks are already provided for that, taken the hit, and the bank's balance sheet may look clean. But are you going to recover the money? To recover the money, you have to go to the courts and follow the same process that you're doing right now within a bank. So all the people in the various banks which are doing that in separate departments will have to be shifted to this other bank. So you're shifting from the left to the right without bringing in legal reforms, without accelerating the process of bankruptcy, etc. You got to reform that first. Setting up a bad bank is what the US does. But you know, Sridhar, when the US set up a bad bank, you get people to buy it, you have people to liquidate. In 2 years, it's all over. Here it's taking 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. Everybody goes to court. The courts don't hear. The courts give a stay. It goes on and on. You have to stop that first. So I think personally, the bad idea. But you know, it's okay. Let the government work with it. Let's see what happens.
Thank you very much, Mohandas Pai. Sridhar ji, this question is for you. Arun Kumar wants to know, what is the use of accumulating so much reserve which earns a pittance? The reserves are a result of propping up the INR versus USD. India is designated a currency manipulator.
The first and foremost, reserves are, as Mohandas Pai ji rightly said, reserves basically provide a vehicle to manage the borrowings that you have overseas. So you are today net credit plus relative to your borrowings. That's number one. But most pivotal need of a reserve is countries which have a smaller economy, which have difficulties in raising capital by virtue of its economic structure, must be able to meet contingent cash reserve, contingent needs out of a reserve that it has. It's like a savings account. It can draw. Let's assume there is a war with China for 30 days, 40 days. Where does it draw the money? Where does the government draw the money from to fund not only the war, but also to fund the domestic needs? The reserves come into play. So reserves are an important vehicle for any government, that it gives the power in terms of managing any contingencies that it faces today, tomorrow, day after.
Thank you very much, Sridhar ji, and thank you very much, Mohandas
Thank you.
Pai. This has been a wonderful discussion because both gentlemen came armed with data and facts, and there is no innuendos. Those of you who belong to the left ecosystem, you are welcome. But if you want to come and join our debate here and present your views, you better come armed with facts and data. Thank you very much, both of you, sir.
Thank you.
Sridhar ji, for guest hosting this event. And as always, we look forward to having you again, Mohandas Pai.
Thank you.
Thank
Namaskar. Namaskar. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Namaskar. Yeah.